Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with founder of Sparsit, Phil Wagner. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by Val Performance, the team behind the NordBord hamstring testing system. So the NordBord is the fastest and easiest, most accurate way to measure hamstring strength. So with the NordBord, you'll get the right information to make the right decisions at the right time. If you want to check them out, you can check them out at valdperformance.com. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by Train with Push, creators of the Push Band. So the Push Band is the first scientifically validated wearable device to provide objective insights into your performance in the gym. So using accelerometers and a gyroscope, the Push Band is able to use bar speed to regulate load and volume based on your ability in the gym on any given day. So you can use the Push Band to quickly establish 1RMs with submaximal load so you can plan with confidence. So the Push Band portal also allows you to create programs before entering the gym to make change on the fly depending on how you are performing on that given day. So you can customize everything from target velocity ranges to differentiating velocities for warm-up and creating working sets and supersets for yourself or your athletes. So if you do want to know more about Train with Push and the Push Band, get yourself over to trainwithpush.com. They also got a great blog, so you can catch up with some guest bloggers such as Mladen Ivanovic and Dan Baker. So be sure to check them out at trainwithpush.com. Thanks for tuning in to episode 88 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today we've got the founder of Sparsit in Phil Wagner. So if you'd listened to the episode with Andrea Hudi at Kansas State, you'll recognise Sparsit. So it was great to get Phil on and just chat about the technology really and the technology that seems to be influencing a lot of professional teams and college teams over in the States. So with Phil, we discuss the trends that he's seeing across all the sports and teams that he's been popping into. We chat about subjectives and also the influence of the Europeans and Aussies over in the States. So a really good chat with Phil. I hope you get something out of it. I know I did, and it was great to chat with Phil about Sparsit. So would love your feedback on all the episodes, including this one with Phil. So enjoy the episode, and I'll speak to you soon. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today we've got Phil Wagner coming from Sparsit. So welcome to the podcast, Phil.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Do you want to just give a little bit of intro into yourself, your background, and maybe a little bit about Sparsit and a bit of background on that, in case anyone hasn't heard of it and what you guys are doing.
Yeah. So it kind of, for me, it started as a strength conditioning coach. I was drawn to the field from injuries as an athlete, and so went into strength conditioning to try to help others kind of avoid some of those pitfalls. And along the way, found that was fired a few times because we just didn't win, and really had a bad taste in my mouth for being involved in a profession where merit wasn't used to evaluate my performance. And so as a result, after 8 years of that, went into medical school for the next 5 years to learn about medicine and how evidence and data is used with patients, and came out from medical school, graduated and as a physician, and opened Sparsit up here in Northern California with the idea of helping validate the field of strength conditioning and help innovate and make sure that athletes were provided the best opportunity they could to be healthy.
as you got into after you've been to medical school, what was your reflection back on S&C as an industry, and how people went about things after being through the kind of rigors of medical school?
Yeah, I think the biggest striking thing going through medical school is the consequences are much more apparent in medical school, and just medicine and hospital in generals. That a lot of times there's life and death situations, and so as a result, building process and following evidence was really critical as a doctor and in hospitals, because if you didn't, people would die. It really kind of allowed a little bit reflection back on strength conditioning. It's not life or death by any means what we deal with, but there is an urgency in that being an elite athlete, that doesn't last forever. There is a small window. And so while not life or death, there is a sense of urgency where those types of lessons could be applied.
So how does the use of research differ in the kind of medical industry compared to, obviously, looking back on your time as an S&C coach?
Yeah, I think the difference being is that there's a much larger buffer between bro science in hospitals. With there's not nearly as much anecdotal research that's being followed, and it's again probably likely because the stakes are higher. A lot of the administrators are former physicians, so have a research understanding. I think a challenge that we have in strength conditioning is many administrators don't have a physiology background. Many sport coaches, at least in the States, don't have the physiology background. So it becomes challenging to help them sift through what's real research and what's good marketing.
So we had Andrea Hudie on from Kansas State. I don't know how many episodes ago, quite a few episodes ago, talking about yourselves. But do you want to just give us a bit of an overview of what Sparta Science is, and the kind of the tech that you implement in places like Kansas?
Yeah, Hudie, Andrew was our first client, or we actually refer to them as partners. She was our first partner school, and so what the software does is it uses force plates to analyze movement. We've been able to patent some of these variables that are meaningful, and then subsequently track them alongside workouts and game stats and injury histories. And so taking all that information, the software is a machine learning tool that basically begins to individualize every athlete's program based on that injury history, the force plate analysis, game stats, ethnicity, and all these other variables that allow the algorithms to learn and be more specific and predictive for each person. I think where Hudie's strength is that she really kind of exposed me to the fact that the best technology, you don't even know it's there. It's ingrained as part of the fabric of whatever culture you define for your organization.
So what's the journey of a player? So an athlete comes into the gym environment. How does one get taken through that kind of Sparta Science journey?
Yeah, so generally the first thing they'll do is a counter movement jump, and what will come out of that will be what we call a movement signature, which looks at an athlete's eccentric force, what we call their load, their concentric rate of force, what we call their explode, and then the third variable is their concentric impulse, or their drive. And the ratios of those three form a unique signature, like a fingerprint, where every individual then can have their own solution to how they approach sport. And as a result, different exercises and programs have now been statistically linked to changing those variables. And as a result, it completes that whole, diagnosis and prescription model that we found in medicine.
The data that it's going to, that the movement signature is going to give you is going to be quite specific in terms of its guidance for that following session. So it's going to prescribe loads, sets, and reps. Is that right?
That's right. Right. Okay. And even to the point now where it might even say, oh, well, sleep has a higher priority than lifting, or, fitness, or a certain sprint distance, so it goes beyond just the lifting component and then starts to look at if other facets need more of a prioritization for that individual.
Mm-hmm. So that movement signature is going to get more in depth as more data has been collected on the system itself.
That's correct. And I think that's the benefit as we've grown is, as we get more partners and more data coming in the system, the data and the algorithms are just getting smarter and more precise, or odds of prediction are getting better.
Yeah. So obviously you've learned, it sounds like you've partnered up with Andrea, quite a lot. But you mentioned when we were chatting before, a couple of other clients. Is there anyone in particular who you've kind of learned as much as you did from Andrea, maybe overseas or even still in the States?
I think, the probably one of the best parts of my job is that I get a chance to see all these different cultures. And so they're all different, and they've all allowed me to really appreciate, coaching and the effects it has on organizations and people. So, Kansas, Hootie, I mentioned, she does an incredible job of really getting all the players to be consistent. I spent some time, last summer over in England and Wales with some of our rugby partners there, and really impressed by the level of professionalism. It's certainly one of the better parts about what I found in the UK. Very inviting, really curious, operating really at a higher level of validation, than we operate here in the States. And then Australia, spent a lot of time there. A third of our clients, partners are in Australia. I think do a super job of really keeping their work days light. And I don't mean that in a lazy way. I just mean that they're highly efficient and that don't see the need to be pulling 12, 15-hour days, 7 days a week like you would see here in the U.S. And then each college has its own culture here in the U.S. or each pro team, and they're all very different. It's like every organization is their own country with their own customs and culture.
Mm. So when you mentioned validation there, obviously that's going to be a huge part of like some of your partners, like the guys in the UK. Obviously, everyone who's coming on board is going to be asking that question. What is? Sorry.
So you just picked up on the positive attribute of the UK ones. That was it, huh?
You are sorry. Say that again.
I said you're just picking on the positive one for the UK, right? On that one.
So obviously the validation is going to be a big thing for everyone who's coming into, getting in touch with you about your system. What is out there in regards to validation?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of two things. One is, validating the actual variables of an assessment is a key piece, because that's ultimately what you're trying to base the decision making off. But the one that's even more lacking that we feel we're helping fill a need in is the validation of the subsequent action, right? So we validate the assessment, right? But we have to start breaking this habit of conceptually addressing the assessment. It'd be like getting a blood test and, not having equal validation or research behind the subsequent antibiotic or antifungal. And so validating not only the assessment, but also more importantly, the treatment, and which exercise has been, vetted by third parties and lots of data that it's more effective than another to help an individual.
So I just wanted to move on a little bit with regards to just the kind of collection of data globally. There's been a couple of news stories. Well, one in particular news story over here in the last couple of days with regards to an ex-Premier League footballer talking about sports scientists kind of getting a lot of, becoming very powerful in the decisions that they make for players kind of during the week leading up to games and things. And a couple of questions came out of that on social media with regards to the reliance on the collection of data. Obviously, that's your business. But what are you seeing with regards to coaches implementing the data that obviously collects on your system, but also keeping the coaching aspect? So a good mixture of the two. Is that happening, or are you seeing a kind of a huge reliance on that data and maybe losing the coaching side of it?
Yeah, I think probably in the U.S. we have less of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think where we're historically have in strength conditioning in the U.S. not a lot of technology's been used here. As a result, the art of coaching or the actual applied side is really strong, and overseas the technology experiences and education is far greater. I think the challenge is going to be here globally. How do we maintain that balance, right? How do we make sure that data is not making all the decisions, and ultimately how do we make sure there's not too much data, right? Because that's the biggest thing I see is that there's so much information out there that what variables dictate action tend to change on a weekly basis. And as a result, you never really get any consistent findings, right? And then I think the other thing is the athlete and the staff never gets consistent education, because a big piece that data should serve to do is to help educate the athlete. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones, it's their career. Whether it's high school, college, or pro, it's their career and they're responsible for it, and they should have access and understand all of their data. And if that's occurring, that can really help check to make sure, that all the data that's being used is not only transparent, but applied in a way that's beneficial.
Is there a fear from guys over there that with the influence of the kind of probably guys from the UK or the guys from Australia, that's gonna kind of inhibit the industry? And
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's absolutely. I mean, I think in the US there is a fear, of, oh, here comes another Aussie, another Brit, right? They're coming over, right? and the default response tends to be, well, they know a lot about science, technology, but they don't know a lot about coaching, right? And and I think there's it works both ways. I'm sure it's perceived at times where the Americans are just discovered fire, and so I think there's a happy blend between the two. I think there's an incredible experience that we just don't have looking at information and applying it less emotionally to situations, which is really important, right? Because sports are very emotional environments. So I think the advantage that UK and Aussie coaches have is they've been trained in an environment that's less emotional. Mm-hmm. Whereas Americans, they'll swing with the wins and losses too much, right? So I think there's just got to be I'm confident there's not a better way, technical versus applied. The key is trying to meld those in a way that allows the organization and ultimately the athlete to benefit the most.
Mm-hmm. Within the Sparta Science systems, it take into account subjective data as well?
Yes, it does. And I think a lot of that is due to, that's a perfect example, Rob, is probably this RPE phenomenon, right? Like you've got heart rate data, which is some great data, but then you've got a lot of studies showing that RPE might be better, right? And so you've got this rating of perceived exertion, this subjective evaluation that a lot of times is more sensitive to fatigue than heart rate, right? And so it's a great example of we can't ignore the subjectivity or the art of having a conversation.
With the data that's been collected and has been fed into your system, are you seeing a similar trend with regards to the RPE?
Yes, we are. We're seeing the RPE for a few reasons. One is compliance. At least with American athletes, we're not raised in environments where we're using heart rate monitors, from the academy age upwards, right? And so most people don't like wearing it, and a lot of people don't do heart rate monitoring. So the RPE allows for more compliance, more consistency. And I think the other aspect is there's in this day and age, there's so much more social and emotional stress on these players and athletes that, sometimes that can't take into account just from an aerobic measure. And also most of our sports, honestly, just aren't aerobic anyway. And sometimes heart rate monitors struggle with more of those intermittent anaerobic bursts. Majority of our work, a lot of it is in baseball. And as you see from some of their body types, there's not a large aerobic demand, from that sport.
So has there been questions asked with regards to the, not the technology itself, but with obviously this upshot of the usability and compliance with the RPE, that kind of overrides the other parts of the tech that you guys and other companies offer?
Yeah, I think it's really a presentation of, we feel pretty comfortable and confident with the patents we have around the force plate, but ultimately it's whatever works, whatever works for the athlete. And in some cases, if monitoring RPE much more frequently than a force plate test results in a larger benefit, like, we're all in, and so I think ultimately if you're keeping the right motives at the center, then the technology decisions become easier to prioritize. We certainly have software partners that use our software that do not use the force plate.
Okay.
Use actually RPE, a local team, San Jose Earthquakes, an MLS team, use our software, and they use it for, GPS and RPE, but not for the force plate. They don't have a force plate. So it's really each organization's own, and wherever they find the most benefit is, what we're looking to help support.
Mm-hmm. So they use it as an athlete management system?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Because that's ultimately the goal. I mean, we believe the force assessments are a big piece of that, but never the only piece. You've got injury histories, right? You got fatigue monitoring like the RPE and sport loads from GPS systems. Yeah. Mm.
So when it comes to the kind of the future of, we'll go with Sparta Science because that's obviously the obvious conversation. Where do you see that going in the future, and where will people what will people be looking for from you guys in 5-10 years?
Right. I think the biggest need, closer more to the 5-year mark, is, a lot of times, particularly here in the U.S., technology is seen as something that's added, to what we're doing, and that way it's a burden, right? It's just another thing that has to be managed or, acquired, right? Where the future of technology actually has to be less. The technology has to strip away the things that we do that aren't needed, not add more to it, and so I think the future has got to be, as these algorithms, as these software predictive models grow, they should identify what's being done that's not useful. In baseball, it's called eyewash. It's just these things that are done because they've always been done, right? And so really trying to identify what's being done in each organization that doesn't really have any effect, or even it has a negative effect, and making sure those are removed so there's more time for sleep, there's more time for rest, there's more time for discussion, not more time for spreadsheets. And so, but 10 years, further down the line, we see, at least from our own perspective, an ability to really accurately benchmark where athletes should be at in their developmental process, both from a performance standpoint, but also in that return to play process, which is often a very murky area.
So on a more global sense, where do you see things going from a performance point of view with regards to tech?
Yeah, I think I think the field is going to hopefully start shifting more towards action and insights. Right now, it's the focus is on collection, and it's got to start shifting to, okay, well, that value is really nice and it's very interesting, right? What are we going to do about it? And I hope that the field starts to shift back towards more of an applied mentality that, okay, we've got great technology and great systems and great new databases, but how are we really using that to change what we do, right? And I think it's got to start shifting here at some point, because I think a lot of organizations are gathering data, and as much data as they can handle, but it's not really changing their day-to-day. I mean, I sat on a panel a month ago and heard professional scouts here with baseball talk about all this new technology that's out there. And then the panel moderator asked, well, what are you guys doing differently with all this new technology? And all three answered honestly, we're doing nothing differently.
Mm-hmm. So do you think it's scaring technical coaches? Obviously, it clearly is. Scaring technical coaches over there?
I think it is. And I think, I think what needs to happen then is the people that are more on the tech side need to make sure that a simplification process is in place, so there's layers, right? Rather than somebody drinking out a fire hose, there can be a layer of okay, superficially, here's a couple things. And then when they start asking questions, you can start peeling back that onion so that education and that knowledge occurs at a much slower, self-selected pace.
So it's kind of things are coming to me as you talk there, and it kind of seems to make tons of sense that sports scientists and S&C coaches, whatever, a lot of the time over here it's kind of mingled into one. But sports scientists as a profession have kind of have pushed on, but technical coaches, it seems like, haven't been dragged along with them, and sports scientists have been pushing and pushing and pushing, but forgetting about the actual thing that actually matters, and that's the guy that's working with the team hands-on, day-to-day, every day. Does that sound pretty accurate?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of theories and colleagues I've talked with. Maybe those sports scientists need to spend time coaching first, or maybe having athletic experience would be beneficial. Personal athletic experience, because you go through that loneliness when you're injured, right? Or the frustration when you're hurt or when you don't make a squad, right? And so all the emotional journeys that you experience as an athlete or a coach, I think, are important lessons prior to be an effective sports scientist.
So for the kind of young sports scientists coming out of college and university, because people are obviously going to university to be that data guy, to be that sports scientist, and not really thinking about the other side. What kind of advice would you give to them guys to actually push themselves to get involved? Would it be technical coaching? Would it be in the gym? Would it be just to get off their ass and go do some sport?
It's a great question. To me, I've learned so much just by my own personal experiences, and so I think there's just an incredible experiential opportunity to physically put yourself outside your comfort zone. I played sports in college, played football, and then rugby, and then when I got done, I Olympic lifted for some time, and then I got trained by power lifters for some time, and just exposed to things and coaches that gave me a lot of different tools in my belt that were all based on how I experienced it as an individual. And what it allows is an incredible amount of empathy to not only a sport coach, but also to, a strength coach or to an athlete. Man, I know what it's like, getting fired, or I know what it's like, blowing your hamstring. I don't even have a left hamstring anymore because, as an athlete, I'm just not a very good athlete, but I kept playing and kept, enduring some of these issues. And ultimately it just made me a better coach or a better sports scientist.
So just coming back to the data itself, what are you seeing from or hearing from the guys that you're working with? And you mentioned about cutting things back to collecting the data that actually matters. What are you seeing out there that people are actually cutting back and binning, and what are the stuff that they're keeping and seeing really real value in?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is it's looking at it from a different way of depth rather than width.
Yeah.
So doing less tests more often and trying to soak more out of those less tests. So, as opposed to doing a battery of tests, once or twice a year. And so a lot of the values worldwide that we're seeing kind of remain and float to the top. RPEs continues to be probably the most widely used globally we've seen. For those that do use GPS, it's just so simple of high-speed distance, sprinting is a big value that's always included. We see, and then really after that, the majority comes down to injury history is a massive one that needs to be kept at the forefront, because whatever we talk about, heart rate or even force plate, none of it holds a candle to a previous injury history and that predictive value. So making sure that that's always tracked and aware of is their injury history. And then their sports stats. They spend the majority of the time in their sport, right? So how many minutes are they playing for a match in rugby or a basketball game? How many scrums were there, or how many rebounds did they have? To give an idea of what kind of stress they're enduring in the environment where they spend the most time.
So, what are you seeing this tech kind of taken on by smaller organizations that are beginning to see real value in the data collection side of things?
Yeah, it's a great question, because actually the smaller ones are as motivated, if not more so, than the larger ones. And I think it's because, the big money over here, right? The NFL, similar to over you guys with the Premier League, like if you got guys, while they cost a lot of money, if they blow out, you got other guys to take their place right away. And the smaller schools, they don't have that depth, and they don't have the resources or the manpower of staff. And so as a result, how do they deal with those different resources? Is to be more efficient. And so they see technology as a way to be more efficient with the limited capacity they have, both on players as well as staff.
So those are obviously I'm just getting into the, I feel like I'm going to buy this right here, right now. But I'm just asking, there's obviously different packages for these guys. There's kind of minimum program for the, I don't know, Division 2, Division 3 colleges, rather than the kind of big hitters like Kansas, who may get the force plates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a range. It's based on the number of users, right? Because, there are some users, like a basketball team we work with, the Warriors, Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
They have 15 players on a team. And so managing that group is, far easier than, we have a university here, University of Pennsylvania, that has 1,000 student athletes.
Wow.
And so for them, it's, the benefit is so much about communication, and that's, I think, a big piece about technology. It's not to mystify or complicate, but rather to simplify and communicate. And so having that platform when you've got different facilities and different teams, that's their value, as opposed to, a Warriors where they've got a 1-to-1 staff ratio, and but every player counts, and how closely we can, monitor and watch those guys to make sure, they're on the court as much as possible. So it's different approaches for different size organizations, and different cultures, right? Some people, they don't value, a space like the NFL. They're not going to place a high value on player development. They place a high value on talent identification for the draft, right?
Yeah.
How do we identify the next player and possibly replace somebody on my current roster? Whereas the academy system in soccer and minor leagues in baseball, it's like, okay, well, how do we draft a guy and then chart his development and like a stock price, right? We've invested in him. We want to nurture him and grow, so our investment, pays off.
So how are you dealing with that as a business? How are you kind of trying to get into educate these guys, or hopefully make them see that the kind of nurturing development side of things is the way to go?
Yeah, I think it's listening is the biggest thing probably first. I mean, I went into the NFL. We work with a few NFL teams, and I went in there thinking, player development, right? We work in baseball. My interest is player development, so we're going to talk to the NFL about player development. But for them, it's all about the draft. It's all about identifying talent. So it's really, first step is taking a step back, and you had asked earlier about young sports scientists. That's the other recommendation is listen. I wasn't listening. And so listening more, found that, that's where their interest was. And so we had to develop ways to give them what would help them. And so, show them, here's so-and-so's force plate movement signature, and here's a player on your roster with the same movement signature. And what that allows is within an organization, it allows that communication, because now a scout who has never seen this player, when he's got a profile next to a player he does know, now he understands why or if this organization drafts the player. So technology then can work to be that bridge of communication using real science.
Yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting. So where are you? Are you getting out and about? Is there plenty of events going on for you guys this time of year?
Yeah, I think most of our travel is based on installing technology at new places, or updating or upgrading the technology at our current partners. I'm going to Australia here in a couple weeks to install the remaining Super 15 teams there, and get started with them. Get a chance to watch the RFU play the Australia and on their tour down there at the same time.
Nice.
And then got some new universities starting over the summer, and some older partners. Starts to get more exciting because we start to get to help them strip away some of the things they found to not be helpful, and really make their lives easier and more validating. I think a great piece that's happened to us twice in the last month is we've had coaches saying, "Hey, can you put together a report for me so I can go get a raise?" And that's awesome. That's exactly what we got into this for, is this validation of like, I've never had anything to show somebody else that I've done a kick-ass job. And do you have anything scientifically and visually to show the job I've done? And it's the first time that's happened to us. I mean, we're only 3 years old, and it's starting to validate our mission, right? Which is to figure out, what is a good strength coach and what's a good program? And we're just starting to dip into that this summer, and exciting for that to grow out, to validate these individuals.
So where can people keep up to date with what you guys have got going on?
Yeah, we have a blog. It's probably for your audience a great place, where we like getting feedback and certainly post guest posts all the time of different coaches or administrators on their perspectives. So the blog's at spartapoint.com.
And you're on Twitter as well?
Yeah, we're on Twitter as well. Sparta Science. And I think, we've become a little bit more involved in social media lately, which has been nice to kind of start connecting our partners too. I mean, it's great for us to have some of our Australia partners talk with, Hootie and the UK and start mixing, connecting people is just great. We've got the Northampton Saints in your neck of the woods coming out next week.
Nice.
And we just set them up to go visit one of our other partners, Cal Berkeley, University of California. So it's that kind of, networking and that, we're excited about too, to help these coaches learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so Northampton Saints have got a system, have they?
Yeah, so the Saints have got a system, and then one of the coaches is on professional development leave, so he'll come over here, and we've set him up with some visits, and so it should be a nice kind of way to tie in some new perspectives for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Well, very good. Well, thanks for your time, Phil. Really appreciate it, and it's great to chat. But I'll let you go. I've kept you for long enough now. I'm sure you've got a busy day ahead. So well, thanks very much, and we'll keep in touch.
Rob, thank you. This is a great podcast. So yeah, keep it going. It's been great.
Thanks,
you,
mate. Speak to you soon.
All right, take care.
See you, mate. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to episode 88 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the chat with Phil. So just before I let you go, I just want to say a massive thanks to both Train with Push and Val Performance for sponsoring the podcast today. So again, just letting you know, got some great guests coming up over the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned, and you can follow me on Twitter at Pacey Perform to keep up to date with everything that's going on in the podcast. So hope you enjoyed the show, and I will speak to you next week.